Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I want to talk to you about self-published books and why I like them so much. So this video is going to be half me talking about the joys and importance of self-published books and half a review of 3 particular self-published books which I've read recently. Before we start though, a quick trigger warning. So all 3 of these books deal with rape and sexual abuse. So if that's something that's going to be triggering for you, you may want to stop watching the video now. Right, so let's start by talking about self-published books, and let's start with a bit of a definition. So what I mean by self-published is a book that has been published by the author without the involvement of a publishing house. So, up until 15, 20 years ago, if you wanted to get a book published and into the hands of the reading public, you needed to submit it to a publisher. They needed to take it through a lengthy review process, decide they wanted to get the rights to it, and then publish it. And what that meant was that thousands and thousands of books that have been written and honed to perfection by authors never saw the light of day. So they ended up in publisher slush piles, as they called them, just waiting for somebody at the publishing house to actually read them. And even when they did get read, if they got read, it may well be that the person who read them, the book didn't appeal to them, and therefore the book never saw the light of day. What's happened, more recently is that technology has provided, a great service to authors in terms of the ability, providing the ability for people to self-publish, either on Kindle or using a print-on-demand service. So all 3 of these books that I'm going to talk about here today are available on Kindle. They're all on Kindle Unlimited, in fact, but you can get print versions of all of them as well. And typically these will be print-on-demand. So, when a consumer goes on to a site like Amazon, decides they want to buy the book, at the moment they click that button, the book doesn't exist physically. Amazon will then print it, chuck it in the post, and you get it the next day, which is a pretty amazing service, I've always thought. So I think self-publishing is really, really important in the modern world. And increasingly we are seeing authors who've started out as self-published authors kind of breaking out and making it really big. So like E.L. James, who wrote the 50 Shades of Grey book, started out as a fan fiction writer. I think Colleen Hoover started out self-publishing. Darcy Coates started out self-publishing. So these are all authors who've become big names. And they, there's a reasonable chance that in the old model, in the old publishing models, they wouldn't have done. Now, with some of those authors, some people might think that maybe that would be a good thing if 50 Shades of Grey had never been published. But I think it's really important that we have a different route into that, a different way of getting books into the hands of readers nowadays. And it gives all of us, it gives us as readers, as well as authors, more freedom and more choice, which I think has got to be a good thing. The danger with self-published books is that there are so many of them nowadays that it can be different to stand out from the crowd. And that's why I think it's important for, for reviewers like me to talk about self-published books. And I do try and do it, fairly regularly on the channel. So as I say, I've got 3 that I'm going to talk about today, all of which have been sent to me by the authors, and all of which I enjoyed to varying degrees. So let me talk quickly now then about the difference, or what is often the difference between a self-published book and a traditionally published book. And the main difference is that a self-published book is unlikely to have gone through the hands of an editor. So, some authors who are self-publishing will have hired an editor to review their work and give them suggestions on it and things like that. But many of them will not have, because it's an expensive thing to do. And books like this are often a labour of love. It's difficult to make money, or certainly difficult to make a living wage, publishing your own work. So people who do it probably aren't going to have the funds, or won't necessarily have the funds, to hire an editor. And what that means is books like these can feel a bit raw, and that's definitely the case for all 3 of these books, which isn't necessarily criticism. And in some ways I quite enjoy that about self-published books. I enjoy the fact that what you are reading is the unfiltered thoughts and words and talent of the author without an editor having got involved. So editing is a really, really important process in the publishing industry, but it can lead, I think, to a bit of blandness, because there'll be trends and things like that in publishing that editors try to enforce on the books they're editing in order to make them as saleable as possible, and that can, it smooths the rough edges off of books, but it can also smooth off, I think, a bit of the individuality. And if you think about things from a movie perspective, increasingly we see with big blockbuster movies that they're all kind of the same. You think about the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, which are hugely successful but incredibly formulaic, and it feels like there is a hand on all of them, the hand of Kevin Feige, I guess, whatever his name is, just smoothing off the rough edges and making sure that they conform to what Disney and Marvel want from their kind of product. And I do worry sometimes that with big publishing houses that that can happen as well with books. So it's fun sometimes as a reader to read books like this that are a bit rough around the edges, but also have a bit more kind of raw authenticity than some of the books you see from big publishers. To make a comparison, you're watching this video now, right? And it is definitely not slick and polished. It's definitely rough around the edges. I and ah a lot. I mess up a lot. I'm doing it again. And this is a very different experience. So watching this, you may be watching it on a TV. Watching me on your TV is a very different experience from watching something from a TV channel on your TV. But you consume it in the same way, and that's kind of the comparison I'd use with self-published books versus and particularly self-published books that haven't been professionally edited, compared to books that have come out from a big publishing house. There's that kind of rawness there, which can be quite engaging, and hopefully, certainly when I watch YouTube videos, that's the thing I like about them. The thing I love about YouTube is that authenticity from the creators. So you are kind of tapping directly into their brains to an extent, with no filters, with nobody else interfering with it. And it's that same kind of feeling I get from self-published books. Right, so let's talk about each of these three books in turn then. So first up, we have Innocent Assassin by Paul McDonald. So this is the first in what's going to be a series, so the Sakura Bianchi series. So Sakura, who's the heroine of this book, suffers an appalling attack. So she and her mother are raped at the start of the book, and her mother's killed by a gang of horrible guys. And Sakura then trains herself to go after them and get revenge. And what I loved about this book, so it, this is like the other two books. There's a roughness to this book. The prose is not always quite as good and slick as it could have been. There is a bit of kind of repetition of phrases and words and things like that. I think an editor would definitely have smoothed down. But what is amazing about this book is the extreme violence that the heroine enacts on the guys that she goes after. So it contains quite possibly some of the most horrific death scenes I've read for a very long time. It's extremely graphic, horrifically inventive, but quite enjoyable for that, because you do feel for Sakura and you do want her to get revenge on these guys who are absolute scumbags, and she definitely gets revenge. So that extreme violence in this book definitely lifted it above some other self-published stuff I've worked. It stood out, and it is quite memorable as a result, despite some of the other flaws that the book has. Okay, moving on then, we have A Mother's Revenge by Lucy Phyre. So this is a South African book, so that's quite interesting actually, reading a book set in modern South Africa. It's been a while since I've read one, I think. So this, as the title suggests, this is about a mother taking revenge, in this case for an attack on her daughter who is murdered. And it is it's a really grim book. So like Innocent Assassin, it's very graphic at times. Innocent Assassin has as I said, a kind of a B-movie vibe to it, which helps it feel a bit less disturbing and horrible at times. A Mother's Revenge doesn't have that, and it is quite disturbing at times. It's certainly horrific. But what's interesting about it is you see the events that have happened in the past and the events that are playing out as the mother gets revenge through various different characters' eyes. And each of those characters adds a bit more to the story. So you come to learn more and more about all the people involved in this attack and their motivations for doing it. None of which are, justified clearly, but it gives an interesting richness to the book, and I thought it was a real strength of this book that you get that breadth to it. In terms of this, it's really an analysis and deconstruction of this crime, so that you really understand all the different elements of it. And whilst again, like Innocent Assassin, I think this book could have been better edited. There are some parts that I think could have been played out differently. Maybe some of the order of the way the events are relayed could have been changed. But actually, that variety you get and the depth you get through seeing things through different characters' eyes actually works really, really well in this book. So yeah, definitely a strength. And then finally, we have Feel Real by Luna Shoryo, which is about a young woman, Ella, who's suffered horrific abuse at the hands of her father. So it's told from three characters' perspectives, so Ella and two of her male friends. And unlike A Mother's Revenge, where as the story unfolds, you get to learn more and more facts about what's happened, in this book, you come to kind of doubt your recollection and the characters' recollections of some of the events of the book, which isn't to say it's about kind of fake memories of abuse or anything like that. The abuse in this book is real, but the impact of that abuse on Ella's mental state is such that she starts to kind of have delusions and things like that, and comes to doubt her own sanity. So a really interesting book about the impacts of abuse. It is, like the other books, it is rough around the edges at times, and it could definitely have done with an edit, and is I think a bit longer than it needed to be. It certainly could have been trimmed down a bit. But there are parts of this book which are really, really effective. There's some really powerful scenes in this book, and it is I think an interesting examination of abuse and the impact of abuse on victims. So whilst none of these three books are perfect, I definitely got something out of all of them, and it was interesting to read three different books on a similar subject, which each have a different take on it. So yeah, books like this make me delighted that self-publishing exists, because these are books that may never have seen the light of day if self-publishing wasn't a route that was available to authors. And as I say, I got something out of each of them. So hope you enjoyed that. Let me know in the comments your views on self-published fiction. Let me know if you've got any particular favourite self-published authors. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're doing really good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.